What happens when one of the most famous royals in the world walks onto one of America's most beloved morning shows and completely loses control? In just 37 seconds, a single comment would turn a routine interview into an absolute disaster that nobody saw coming. This is the story of how Prince Harry got kicked off the Today Show after a heated altercation with host Savannah Guthrie that left the entire studio in complete shock. It started like any other morning. Savannah Guthrie sat across from Prince Harry in the familiar Studio 1A, ready to discuss his latest projects and life in America. The cameras were rolling, the audience was eager, and everything seemed perfectly normal. But what was about to unfold would become one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. Savannah opened with a warm smile, welcoming Harry to the show. "It's wonderful to have you here," she said kindly. "Let's start with something our viewers are really curious about. You've been living in California for a few years now. How has that transition been for you and your family?" Harry leaned back in his chair with a casual confidence that immediately felt a bit off. "Well, Savannah, I think the real question is, why did it take me so long to leave in the first place, right?" He laughed, but there was an edge to it. Savannah maintained her professional composure, nodding thoughtfully. "I'm sure it was a difficult decision. Can you tell us about what you're working on now?" "I can tell you what I'm working on," Harry said, his tone shifting slightly. "But I'm not sure you'd understand it. No offense, but American media has a way of simplifying everything." The first red flag. Savannah's smile tightened just a fraction, but she pressed on like the seasoned professional she is. "Well, help us understand then. That's why we're here, to have a conversation." "A conversation," Harry repeated, almost mockingly. "Is that what this is? Because it feels more like an interrogation already." Savannah blinked, clearly taken aback. "I've asked you 2 questions, and they've both been quite friendly. I'm just trying to give you a platform to share your story." "My story," Harry said, leaning forward now. "Everyone wants my story, but does anyone actually listen? Or do you all just want the headlines?" The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Crew members exchanged glances. Savannah took a breath, her professionalism unwavering. "Harry, I assure you, we're here to listen. That's exactly what we want to do. So please, tell us about your new initiative." "You know what, Savannah? Let me ask you a question for once. Do you enjoy this? Sitting here, asking people personal questions? Digging into their lives for entertainment?" Savannah's expression remained calm, but her voice carried a slight firmness now. "I enjoy having meaningful conversations with interesting people. That's my job, and I take it seriously. Just as I'm sure you take your work seriously." "My work?" Harry scoffed. "You mean the work that your network will twist into whatever narrative gets the most clicks?" "We don't twist anything," Savannah said, her voice steady but direct. "We report facts, and we have conversations. If you're uncomfortable with the questions, we can certainly move to a different topic." "Oh, how gracious of you," Harry said, his sarcasm now fully on display. "The mighty Savannah Guthrie will allow me to choose my own topic. Should I be grateful?" The audience had gone completely silent. This wasn't the playful banter that sometimes happened on talk shows. This was genuine hostility, and it was getting worse by the second. Savannah straightened in her chair. "I think we should take a moment here. This interview doesn't have to be confrontational. I'm not your enemy." "Aren't you, though?" Harry shot back. "You and every other journalist who makes a living off of dissecting my life, my family, my choices. You're all the same." "That's not fair," Savannah responded, and for the first time, a hint of frustration crept into her voice. "I invited you here as a guest. I've been nothing but respectful. If you have issues with the media in general, that's understandable, but I'm not the person to take that out on." "Maybe you're exactly the person to take it out on," Harry said, his voice rising. "Maybe someone needs to finally say it to your face, instead of just smiling and playing along with this charade." Savannah took a visible breath, clearly working to maintain her composure. Harry, I understand you've been through a lot. I understand you have complicated feelings about the press. But right now, you're sitting on my show, as my guest, and you're being incredibly rude. Rude? Harry laughed bitterly. You want to talk about rude? Let's talk about how your network has covered my wife. Let's talk about the headlines, the speculation, the constant invasion of privacy. I'm happy to discuss media coverage in a constructive way, Savannah said, her voice measured. But you're attacking me personally, and I haven't done anything to deserve that. Haven't you? Harry countered. By being part of this machine, you're complicit in all of it. The crew was visibly uncomfortable now. Producers off camera were having frantic, whispered conversations. This was spiraling out of control, and everyone knew it. Savannah's jaw tightened. I've spent decades building a career based on integrity and respect. I treat every guest with dignity, regardless of who they are, and I expect the same in return. Expect whatever you want, Harry said dismissively. I'm tired of pretending that this is all okay. I'm tired of playing nice with people who profit from making my life miserable. Then why did you agree to come on the show? Savannah asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. If you feel this way, why are you here? Good question, Harry said, standing up abruptly. Maybe I shouldn't be. Savannah remained seated, her professionalism intact, even as the situation deteriorated. If you want to leave, that's your choice. But I want to be very clear. I've done nothing wrong here. I welcomed you, I asked fair questions, and you've responded with hostility and insults. Fair questions, Harry repeated mockingly. Is that what you call prying into someone's personal life on national television? I asked you about your work and your transition to California, Savannah said firmly. Those are standard, respectful questions. You're the one who turned this into something ugly. Harry pointed at her, his face flushed with anger. Don't you dare put this on me. You people are relentless. You never stop. You never give us any peace. Harry, I'm not you people, Savannah said, her voice now carrying real steel. I'm a person doing my job, and you're being completely out of line. Out of line? Harry's voice was getting louder. I'll tell you what's out of line. What's out of line is the constant harassment, the lies, the manipulation. Savannah stood up now, matching his energy, but maintaining her dignity. None of that is happening right now. What's happening right now is that you're having some kind of breakdown on live television, and I'm trying to handle this professionally. A breakdown? Harry's face contorted with rage. You think this is a breakdown? This is me finally telling the truth. This is me finally saying what everyone in my position wishes they could say to people like you. People like me, Savannah repeated, her voice calm but firm. You mean people who work hard, who treat their guests with respect, who try to do their jobs with integrity? Is that who you're attacking right now? You don't get it, Harry said, shaking his head. You'll never get it because you're on the other side. You're the one with the power here. The power? Savannah's eyes widened slightly. Harry, you're a prince. You have wealth, privilege, and a platform that most people could never dream of. And you're sitting here claiming that I, a journalist, have power over you? You do, Harry insisted. The media has all the power. They control the narrative. They decide what people think. Savannah took a step back, crossing her arms. We report news. We have conversations. We don't control anyone's thoughts. And right now, the only narrative being created is the one you're creating by acting this way. Of course you'd say that, Harry spat. Of course you'd deflect and make it seem like I'm the problem. You are the problem, Savannah said, and her words cut through the tension like a knife. Right now, in this moment, you are absolutely the problem. I've been patient. I've been kind. I've tried to understand where you're coming from, but you've done nothing but attack me from the moment this interview started. Maybe you deserved it, Harry said coldly. The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. That comment had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Savannah's face hardened. "Get out!" "What?" Harry looked genuinely surprised. "I said get out," Savannah repeated, her voice clear and unwavering. "This interview is over. You're being disrespectful. You're being cruel, and I'm not going to sit here and take it anymore." "You can't kick me out," Harry said, incredulous. "Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Savannah said, her voice like ice. "You're someone who came on my show and treated me with complete contempt. You're someone who thinks their title gives them the right to be awful to people. And you're someone who is no longer welcome here." Harry stood there, seemingly unable to believe what was happening. "This is unbelievable." "What's unbelievable is your behavior," Savannah shot back. "I've interviewed world leaders, celebrities, people from all walks of life, and I have never, in my entire career, had someone treat me the way you just did." "Maybe because no one else has the guts to be honest with you," Harry retorted. "There's a difference between honesty and cruelty," Savannah said, her voice steady, despite the obvious emotion behind it. "You're not being brave right now. You're being a bully." "A bully?" Harry laughed harshly. "That's rich coming from someone who makes a living off of exploiting people's pain." "I've heard enough," Savannah said, turning to someone off camera. "Can we please have security escort our guest out?" "You're really doing this?" Harry asked, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I really am," Savannah confirmed. "And I want to be clear for everyone watching. This isn't about censorship or silencing anyone. This is about basic human decency. I will not tolerate being spoken to this way. Not by you. Not by anyone." Two security personnel appeared at the edge of the set. Harry looked at them, then back at Savannah. "This is going to make you look terrible." "I'll take my chances," Savannah said coolly. "At least I can sleep tonight knowing I stood up for myself and my team. Can you say the same?" Harry's face flushed red. "You're going to regret this." "The only thing I regret is giving you this platform in the first place," Savannah responded. "Now, please leave before this gets any more embarrassing for you." Harry opened his mouth as if to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. He ripped off his microphone, letting it clatter to the floor, and stormed toward the exit with security following close behind. The studio remained eerily quiet for a long moment. Savannah stood there, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths, clearly processing what had just happened. Then, slowly, she turned back to the camera. "We're going to take a quick break," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "When we come back, we'll continue with our scheduled programming." But as the camera pulled back, you could see it on her face. The shock, the hurt, the anger at being treated so poorly for simply doing her job. She had handled an impossible situation with grace and strength, refusing to be anyone's punching bag, regardless of their status or title. What had started as a routine morning show interview had turned into a masterclass in standing up for yourself. Savannah Guthrie had drawn a line in the sand, and she had done so with dignity intact. Meanwhile, backstage, Harry was being escorted out of the building. His outburst had been captured on live television, broadcast to millions of viewers who had watched in real time as he melted down and attacked a host who had done nothing but try to have a respectful conversation. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. On one side, a professional who maintained her composure even under attack. On the other, someone who let their anger and entitlement consume them to the point of self-destruction. Back in the studio, as the commercial break continued, crew members gathered around Savannah, offering support and expressing their disbelief at what had just transpired. She thanked them, still visibly shaken but standing tall. "I've never had to do that before," she said quietly to one of the producers, "but I wasn't going to just sit there and take it." "You did the right thing," the producer assured her. "Absolutely the right thing." When the show came back from commercial, Savannah addressed the audience one more time before moving on. I want to thank you all for your patience during that unexpected situation. This show has always been about respectful dialogue and meaningful conversation. When those standards aren't met, we have to take action. Now, let's move forward with the rest of our show. And she did exactly that, transitioning seamlessly into the next segment as if nothing had happened. Because that's what professionals do. They handle chaos with grace. They stand up for themselves when necessary, and they keep going. The entire altercation, from the first uncomfortable exchange to Harry's dramatic exit, had taken less than 15 minutes. But those 15 minutes had revealed everything. They had shown what happens when entitlement meets accountability. They had demonstrated the importance of treating people with respect, regardless of the setting or the circumstances. Savannah Guthrie had walked into that interview, prepared to have a pleasant conversation with a high-profile guest. Instead, she had been forced to defend herself against unprovoked attacks and hostility. And when it became too much, when the line had been crossed one too many times, she had done what needed to be done. She had stood up, looked Prince Harry in the eye, and said enough. In that moment, she had sent a message that resonated far beyond Studio 1A. She had shown that no one, regardless of their title or status, has the right to treat others poorly. She had demonstrated that there are consequences for bad behavior, even for princes. The interview that was supposed to be about Harry's new projects and his life in America had instead become about something much more fundamental. It had become about respect, about boundaries, about what happens when someone refuses to be a doormat. Harry had walked onto that set with an agenda, with anger simmering just below the surface. Whether it was about the media in general or something more specific, he had decided that Savannah Guthrie would be the target of his frustration. He had treated her not as a person, but as a symbol of everything he resented about journalism and public life. But Savannah had refused to play that role. She had refused to be his punching bag. And in doing so, she had taken control of a situation that could have spiraled even further out of control. The questions she had asked were standard, innocuous even. They were the kind of questions that every talk show host asks their guests. There was nothing aggressive about them, nothing invasive, nothing that warranted the response she received. Yet Harry had reacted as if each question was a personal attack. He had twisted her words, attributed malicious intent where there was none, and escalated the situation at every turn. His behavior had been erratic, defensive, and ultimately self-destructive. And through it all, Savannah had remained remarkably composed. Even when Harry's attacks became personal, even when he tried to lump her in with every negative experience he'd ever had with the media, she had kept her cool. She had defended herself firmly, but fairly, never stooping to his level, never matching his hostility with her own. That's the mark of a true professional. The ability to stay calm when someone is trying to provoke you. The strength to stand your ground without losing your dignity. The wisdom to know when enough is enough and to act accordingly. When Savannah finally told Harry to leave, it wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a calculated decision made by someone who had given him every possible chance to course correct. She had tried to de-escalate. She had tried to redirect. She had tried to give him an out. But he had refused every opportunity, choosing instead to dig himself deeper into a hole of his own making. His final comment, suggesting that Savannah deserved his treatment, had been the breaking point. It was cruel. It was unjustified, and it revealed the true nature of what was happening. This wasn't about legitimate grievances with the media. This was about someone taking out their frustrations on an easy target. Someone who couldn't fight back in the ways he was used to. Except Savannah could fight back. And she did. Not with matching hostility, but with something far more powerful. She fought back with boundaries. She fought back by refusing to accept unacceptable behavior. She fought back by valuing herself and her dignity enough to end an interview that had become abusive. the image of Harry ripping off his microphone and storming out, escorted by security, was a stark one. Here was someone who had come onto a morning show expecting to be treated with deference, who had instead discovered that respect is a two-way street. When you don't give it, you don't get it. And when you cross certain lines, there are consequences. For Savannah, the decision to kick Harry off the show couldn't have been easy. Ending an interview with such a high-profile guest mid-broadcast is a serious call. It's the kind of decision that gets scrutinized, analyzed, and debated. But in that moment, she had made the choice that prioritized her own well-being and set an important precedent. She had shown that the Today Show, and by extension she herself, would not tolerate being disrespected. Not for ratings, not for the prestige of interviewing a prince, not for any reason. There are standards, and those standards matter more than any single guest, no matter how famous. As Harry left the building, his anger still visible, he had no idea how his behavior would be perceived by the millions who had witnessed it. He had walked into that studio thinking he was going to make a point, perhaps thinking he was going to expose something about the media or take a stand. Instead, all he had done was expose himself. He had shown a side of himself that many people might not have seen before. The entitlement, the inability to handle straightforward questions, the quickness to attack someone who was simply doing their job. It wasn't a good look, and it wasn't the statement he thought he was making. Savannah, meanwhile, had emerged from the ordeal with her reputation not just intact, but enhanced. She had handled an impossible situation with remarkable poise. She had defended herself without being defensive. She had been firm without being cruel. She had shown that grace under pressure doesn't mean being a pushover. The interview, or rather the spectacular implosion of it, would be talked about for days, weeks, maybe longer. People would debate whether Savannah had overreacted or whether she had waited too long to shut it down. But anyone who watched the full exchange would see the truth. She had been patient, professional, and fair. And when those qualities weren't reciprocated, when they were met instead with hostility and contempt, she had done what she had to do. This wasn't just about one bad interview. It was about something bigger. It was about how we treat each other, especially in situations where there's a power dynamic at play. Harry had assumed that his status gave him license to behave however he wanted. He had assumed that Savannah would simply take whatever he dished out because that's what hosts do. They accommodate their guests. But he had miscalculated badly. He had mistaken professionalism for weakness. He had confused courtesy with subservience. And he had learned, in the most public way possible, that those assumptions were wrong. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. Harry had spent years talking about being mistreated, about being judged unfairly, about dealing with people who didn't respect him. And then he had walked onto a television set and treated someone else with exactly the disrespect he claimed to despise. It was a lesson in self-awareness, or rather the lack of it. It was a reminder that how we treat others, especially those we perceive as having less power than us, says everything about who we really are. Savannah Guthrie had come to work that day expecting to do her job. She had prepared questions. She had done her research. She had been ready to have an engaging conversation with an interesting guest. What she got instead was an ordeal that tested her professionalism in ways she never anticipated. But she had passed that test with flying colors. She had shown strength without arrogance. She had shown assertiveness without aggression. She had shown that it's possible to stand up for yourself while maintaining your dignity. And in doing so, she had given everyone watching a masterclass in how to handle a difficult person. You stay calm. You set boundaries. You give chances for the situation to improve. And when all else fails, when someone shows you repeatedly that they have no intention of treating you with basic respect, you remove yourself from the situation or remove them from yours. The fact that this all happened on live television, in front of millions of viewers, made it even more significant. There was no editing, no ability to reshape the narrative after the fact. What people saw was what actually happened, in real time, with no filter. They saw Savannah try to be gracious. They saw Harry reject that grace repeatedly. They saw the situation deteriorate not because of anything Savannah did, but because of Harry's inexplicable hostility. And they saw her finally say enough, drawing a line that should never have needed to be drawn in the first place. As the show continued after the commercial break, as Savannah moved on to other segments and other guests, there was an undercurrent of tension that couldn't be completely hidden. She had just been through something traumatic, something that would rattle anyone, and yet she persevered. That's professionalism at its finest. Not pretending nothing happened, but acknowledging it briefly and then getting back to work. Not dwelling on it, not letting it derail the entire show, but handling it and moving forward. For everyone in the studio that day, from the crew to the producers to the other guests waiting their turn, it was a moment they would never forget. They had witnessed something extraordinary. Not the spectacle of a celebrity meltdown, though that's certainly what it was, but more importantly, they had witnessed someone stand up for themselves in a situation where it would have been easier to just endure. Savannah Guthrie had shown courage. Not the kind of courage that makes headlines for the right reasons, but the quiet courage of self-respect. The E. Courage to say, I don't deserve this, and I won't accept it. The courage to prioritize her own dignity over the potential backlash of kicking a prince off her show. And that courage, that moment of standing tall in the face of unwarranted aggression, was worth more than any interview ever could have been. It was a statement. It was a standard. It was a reminder that everyone, from princes to paupers, must answer for their behavior. The cameras had captured it all. The slow build of tension, the increasingly hostile comments, the moment when patience gave way to justified anger, the security escort, the microphone hitting the floor. Every second of it was recorded, preserved, ready to be analyzed and discussed. But beyond the spectacle, beyond the drama, there was a simple truth at the heart of it all. Savannah Guthrie had done her job. She had tried to conduct an interview with professionalism and respect, and when her guest refused to meet her at that level, when he chose instead to be combative and cruel, she had ended it. That's not just good television. That's good character. That's knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it, no matter who they are or what title they carry. The story of what happened in Studio 1A that morning would be told and retold. It would be debated and dissected. Some would defend Harry, claiming he was pushed too far or that there was context viewers didn't see. Others would applaud Savannah for her strength and decisiveness, but the facts spoke for themselves. The questions were innocuous. The hostility was unprovoked. The escalation was one-sided, and the resolution, while dramatic, was entirely justified. In those chaotic 15 minutes, two things had been made abundantly clear. First, that Savannah Guthrie was a host who commanded respect not through intimidation, but through professionalism and integrity. And second, that Prince Harry, for whatever reason, had allowed his issues with the media to manifest in a way that was neither productive nor acceptable. It was a collision of personalities and principles. And when the dust settled, only one person was left standing with their dignity intact. Only one person had handled themselves in a way they could be proud of when they watched it back later. That person was Savannah Guthrie, the host who refused to be anyone's target, the professional who knew when to draw the line, the woman who showed millions of viewers what it looks like to stand up for yourself with grace and strength. And that's the real story behind the headline. Not just that a prince got kicked off a show, but why he got kicked off, how it happened, and what it revealed about both the guest who lost control and the host who kept hers.